Hello and welcome back to Music Domain on Game Domain. Today we will be delving back into the world of music theory with an analysis of a classic piece of video game soundtrack, the Super Mario Galaxy main theme. For many of us who grew up playing games on the now ancient console that is the Nintendo Wii, Super Mario Galaxy is one of the fondest memories we have of our childhoods, and simply hearing that triumphant main theme is enough to let loose a flood of nostalgia. But what makes that theme sound so epic? So powerful, so fun? Well, that's what our analysis here will aim to uncover. As we'll soon find out, the Super Mario Galaxy theme shares a substantial amount of musical elements with other heroic-sounding pieces from other video games and movies. Now, before we begin, if you aren't knowledgeable on music theory, this will be a really confusing video, so maybe watch a beginner's video on music theory before you watch this. To begin, let's take a look at the first three notes of the entire piece. The theme begins with a fast, triplet walk-up from B-flat to E-flat, very quickly establishing us in the key of E-flat major. For more information on certain musical terms, such as keys, watch our other video on the music theory behind Bohemian Rhapsody. This figure passes through three separate notes, B-flat, C, and D, before landing on our tonic or home bass note of E-flat. Part of what makes this brief opening sound so powerful is that the note it begins on, B-flat, resolves directly into the note it ends on, E-flat. B-flat is the fifth scale degree on E-flat major, meaning that if you were to go up on the E-flat major scale 5 notes, you would end on B-flat. Five moving to 1, our 1 of course being our tonic, in this case E-flat, is one of the most powerful sounds in music, and can give a piece a sense of finality or closure. You'll remember we talked a lot about dominant 7th chords and resolutions in our Bohemian Rhapsody video, and the same principle is at play here. Dominant 7th chords are built upon the 5th scale degree in a key, and go directly to the chord built upon the tonic, like this. The same thing is happening here, just sans the chord. We only have the notes, B-flat and E-flat, being played, just without the corresponding chords being played on top of them. The C and D added between these two main notes are just for extra decoration or ornamentation. Another thing that contributes to this intro's distinct sound is where in the music it occurs. The triplet figure is played on what is called a pickup beat, meaning that it technically starts before the actual beginning of the piece. Here, listen to that intro again, but this time with a metronome overlaid on top of it. You'll hear 4 beats on the metronome before the piece begins. Notice how that triplet occurs as a sort of anticipation before that 5th click? Adding a pickup is a common method that composers use to get their audience into their piece without thrusting them directly into the melody right off the bat. Immediately following this introduction, we see some interesting harmonic tactics being deployed that contribute to the overall heroic sound of the piece. Listen to the first bit of the opening melody. Notice anything that sounded weird? If we stop on the 4th note of the melody, we notice that something doesn't sound quite right. That's because this note is an A natural, which is from outside of the key of E-flat major. Normally in E-flat major, we have an A-flat, which sounds like this. But this note, A natural, is a half step up from a natural and sounds like this. This note is borrowed from the key of E-flat Lydian, which is similar to E-flat major, except the 4th note of the scale is raised a half step, as mentioned before. This means that the A-flat from E-flat major becomes an A natural. Listen to the first 4 notes of an E-flat major scale. And then compare that to the first 4 notes of E-flat Lydian. This raised note can give an extra, unexpected edge to a piece, and is often used by composers to instill a sense of wonder and curiosity in their listeners. Immediately following this, we hear a few more odd notes from outside the key, but this time, these standout notes come from the bass, or lowest part, and not the melody. Listen on to the rest of the piece, and pay extra attention to the lowest register. You'll hear how it descends normally by steps, but the notes it passes through don't seem to totally fit within the key. That's because the notes it's playing are E flat, D flat, and C flat, or B natural. C flat and B natural are two names for the same note. Those notes sound like this. And combined with the other instrumental parts, they form the chords E flat major, D flat major, and C flat major or B major. Again, two names, same note, same chord. However, the only chord in this sequence that actually is found in E flat major is, well, obviously E flat major. The other chords are from outside the key, and the root notes that they are constructed upon are the 1, flat 7, and flat 6 of E flat major. Interestingly enough, these chords are exactly the same as a chord progression commonly used in other Mario games, aptly dubbed the Mario cadence. A cadence simply means a series of chords that can be used to get back to the tonic, or one chord of a given key. A dominant 7-to-1 resolution is the simplest of all the cadences. If the previously mentioned three chords are played in the reverse order to how they appear in the Super Mario Galaxy theme, the Mario cadence is formed, like this. The next part of the piece is actually fairly straightforward, though we'll still be looking at one key part of it, the rhythm. After the introduction, the melody cuts away, and we're left with only a rhythmic part that sounds like this. This pattern comes up time and time again throughout the piece, making it an example of a motif. A motif is a short, melodic, harmonic, or, as in this case here, rhythmic idea that reappears, sometimes in slightly altered forms, over and over again in a piece of music. Motifs help to give an added degree of consistency to a piece. This specific motif, being as rhythmically driven as it is, also helps to give the piece a very march-like, triumphant feeling. This motif continues to repeat throughout the majority of the following section, with only occasional interruptions. Besides that, however, there isn't much to analyze in this section, with both the melody and harmony being fairly straightforward. Moving on to about a minute and 20 seconds into the piece, we find another point of interest in the piece. After a brief, quieter interlude, we hear a sudden build in intensity, followed by a return to the main melody. However, this time around, the melody has been transposed into a new key, F major. Transposition simply refers to the operation of taking an already existing musical segment and moving it into a new key. The act of changing a key in and of itself is called modulation. Changing keys is a great way to breathe life into a piece and prevent it from stagnating. And transposing an existing melody into said new key allows a composer to make an already heard melody feel exciting and fresh. However, this new key of F major doesn't stick around for very long before we get another modulation, this time into A flat major. At this point, the piece slows down considerably and moves into an entirely new melody. The sudden reduction in pace, coupled with the absence of the heavy brass and percussion sections, leaving only the woodwinds and strings, makes this section feel calmer and more tranquil compared to the powerful main theme of the piece. Having a sudden change like this helps to vary a piece of music, and is a technique often used to introduce new emotions and moods. As suddenly as this section begins, however, the section following it feels even more abrupt and out of nowhere. Immediately following the slower section, we get a sudden return to the rhythmic motif we talked about before, coupled with an increase in the speed of the music to match that of the beginning. Speaking of the beginning, we also hear the opening main theme return once more for one last hurrah, this time in its entirety, unlike the brief part of it we heard when we first changed to F major. One of the only changes between this and the first time we heard this theme is the very ending. Right before the piece ends, we hear a fragment of the main theme repeated 3 separate times. The first time we hear it, it's in A-flat major, the key that we've been in for quite some time now. The second time we hear it is in the key of A major, a half step higher than A-flat. And the third and final time we hear it is in the key of B-flat major, another half step up. The process of moving around by half steps, the smallest possible distance between notes there is called chromaticism. Though these changes in keys are too brief to be called full modulations, they nonetheless provide a lot of color to the piece. Ending off in such a powerful and dramatic way allows a composer to keep their piece interesting, even until the very last note. Though the piece does eventually go back into A-flat major, the little bit of chromaticism still gives a lot of depth to a piece that just as easily could have ended off without anything too interesting. Speaking of endings, we've just about reached the end of this video as well, so thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoyed learning a bit more about a piece of music that, if you're anything like us, is a massive source of nostalgia. Be sure to check out our other game domain and music domain videos, and be sure to subscribe and check out our Discord.